There is a place on Earth so deep that if you dropped a stone from the surface, it would not reach the bottom for a long time. Not because the stone is slow, but because the ocean above it is almost impossible to imagine. Deeper than the height of Mount Everest, darker than any night on land, and under pressure so powerful that most machines would be crushed before they ever saw the floor. This place is not on another planet. It is not hidden under ice on a distant moon. It is here, on Earth, beneath the Pacific Ocean, the Mariana Trench. Most people know the name, but almost no one understands what it really means. Because the Mariana Trench is not just the deepest place in the ocean, it is one of the most extreme environments humans have ever entered. A world where sunlight never arrives. A world where the water itself becomes a force. A world where life should not be comfortable, and yet somehow still exists. At its deepest known point, called Challenger Deep, the seafloor lies almost 11 kilometers below the surface. That number is easy to hear and hard to feel. So imagine the tallest mountain on Earth placed upside down into the ocean. Even Mount Everest would disappear inside the trench. Its summit would still remain buried beneath the water. That is how far down this place goes. But depth alone is not the real mystery. The real mystery is what scientists found when they finally began to reach the bottom. For a long time, people imagined the deepest ocean as a dead zone. Too dark for plants. Too cold for ordinary life. Too much pressure for anything fragile. A silent layer of mud at the end of the world. But the trench did not match that simple idea. When cameras and submersibles reached the bottom, they found movement. Tiny animals, microbes living in sediment, strange pale creatures built for a world with no sunlight. The deepest place on Earth was not empty, it was alive. And that made the discovery even stranger, because everything down there has to survive without the rules we know at the surface. There are no forests, no sunlight, no warm coastlines, no familiar food chain, only darkness, cold, pressure, falling particles, and whatever the ocean carries down from above. In that world, every living thing is an answer to a question scientists are still trying to understand. How does life survive when the environment is trying to destroy it? How does food reach a place almost no creature can visit? How can anything adapt to pressure more than 1,000 times stronger than the air we breathe? But the trench revealed something else too. Something less mysterious and more uncomfortable. Human traces had reached the bottom. Plastic, pollution, signs from the surface world. Even the deepest place on Earth was not truly separate from us. That is why the Mariana Trench matters. It is not just a record-breaking location. It is not just a dark line on a map. It is a hidden system. A place where Earth's crust is being pulled downward. A place where life survives at the edge of possibility. A place where the ocean collects secrets from the world above. And a place that reminds us of a strange fact. We have looked at Mars. We have photographed distant galaxies. We have sent spacecraft beyond the outer planets. But one of the most alien worlds humans have ever discovered is still beneath our own ocean. Right here, on our own planet, waiting in the dark. This is the story of what scientists found at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the deepest known place on Earth, and one of the last worlds we are still trying to understand. From the surface, the Mariana Trench does not look like a place that should change the way we understand Earth. There is no giant whirlpool above it, no open crack in the ocean, no warning sign on the water. A ship can pass over the deepest place on the planet and see only waves, clouds, and an empty blue horizon. That is what makes it so strange. The most extreme valley on Earth is almost completely invisible. To understand it, you have to stop thinking of the trench as a whole. It is not simply a deep pit filled with water. It is a wound in the planet's crust, a scar created by forces so slow that humans cannot watch them move, but so powerful that they can reshape the entire world. The Mariana Trench lies in the western Pacific Ocean, near the Mariana Islands. Below that quiet surface, two massive pieces of Earth's crust meet. They are not still. They are moving, very slowly, only a few centimeters each year. But over millions of years, that tiny movement becomes enormous. One plate is being forced beneath another. This process is called subduction. It sounds simple, but it is one of the engines of the planet. A dense slab of oceanic crust sinks downward into Earth's interior. As it goes down, the seafloor bends with it. The result is a long, narrow trench that drops deeper than any other known place in the ocean. This means the Mariana Trench is not just a destination, it is an active boundary, a place where the planet is recycling its own surface. Rock that once formed the ocean floor is being pulled into darkness. Sediment that rested quietly for ages is dragged toward the deep. The crust itself is disappearing beneath another plate. And above all of it, the ocean looks calm. That contrast is the real hook of the trench. At the surface, peace. At the bottom, pressure. Beneath the waves, the earth is folding, breaking, sinking, and changing. This is also why the region is connected to earthquakes and volcanic activity. When plates grind against each other, stress builds. When that stress is released, the result can shake the seafloor. And when material melts deeper inside the planet, it can help feed island arcs and volcanoes nearby. So the Mariana Trench is not a deadline on a map. It is part of a moving system, a hidden machine under the Pacific. And that machine has been operating for longer than human history, longer than civilization, longer than the oldest ruins we have ever found. It was working before humans built cities, before humans crossed oceans, before anyone looked at the water and wondered what was beneath it. For most of history, people had no idea this underwater scar existed. They could sail across it without knowing that below them, the seafloor was falling into one of the deepest places on Earth. That is one of the most unsettling facts about the ocean. It hides scale. It hides motion. It hides danger. It hides entire landscapes under a surface that looks flat. The Mariana Trench is the perfect example of that illusion. From above, it is just ocean. From below, it is a boundary between worlds. One world is the familiar surface, full of light, air, ships, and weather, and the other is a dark geological engine, where the crust of the planet sinks into pressure and shadow. And this matters because the trench is not only deep, it explains something bigger. Earth is not finished. Our planet is still moving, still building, still destroying, still swallowing parts of itself and creating new ones. The Mariana Trench is one of the clearest reminders that the ground beneath us is not as stable as it feels. Even the ocean floor is temporary. Even continents move. Even the deepest places are not frozen in time. They are part of a planet that is alive in a geological sense. And that is why the next question becomes even more powerful. If the Mariana Trench is not just a hole, but an active wound in the planet, then what happens at the bottom? What kind of world exists where Earth's crust is sinking, sunlight never arrives, and pressure is stronger than almost anything humans can build? That is where the real mystery begins. For most of human history, the deepest place on Earth existed without a name. People sailed above it. Storms passed over it. Ships crossed the Pacific again and again. But almost no one knew that beneath the surface, the ocean floor was falling into a darkness deeper than any mountain is tall. That is one of the most disturbing facts about the Mariana Trench. It was not hidden in some distant galaxy. It was not locked behind another planet. It was right here, under a route humans could travel. And still, it remained almost invisible. The reason was simple. You cannot see depth from the surface. The ocean hides its shape. A calm blue horizon can cover a flat seabed, an underwater mountain, or a trench that drops almost 11 kilometers down. To the human eye, all of it looks the same. Water. For a long time, the only way to measure the deep ocean was almost painfully simple. Sailors lowered a heavy weight attached to a long line. If the weight touched the bottom, they measured how much line had gone down. That number became the depth. But in deep water, this method was difficult and uncertain. The ship moved. The current pulled the line sideways. The weight could drift, and in the deepest parts of the ocean, the line had to travel through kilometers of moving water before it reached anything solid. Still, this was how humans began to discover that the ocean had a hidden landscape. Not just a bottom, a world. In the 19th century, a British research vessel called Challenger began one of the most important scientific voyages ever made. Its mission was to study the oceans in a way no one had done before. The crew measured depth, collected samples, recorded temperatures, studied marine life, and lowered instruments into waters that had never been properly examined. Near the Mariana Islands, they found something that changed the map of the planet. The seafloor was far deeper than expected, not a little deeper, extremely deeper. Their measurements revealed a place that seemed to fall beyond ordinary ocean depth. It was one of the first signs that the Pacific was hiding a giant trench. Later, the deepest known area would be called Challenger Deep, in honor of that expedition. But at the time, scientists still had a problem. They had numbers, they had estimates, they had a location, but they did not have a real image of the bottom. No one had seen it. No one had touched it. No camera had looked across its floor. The deepest place on Earth was still only an idea built from measurements. Then came sonar, and sonar changed the ocean forever. Instead of lowering a line into the water, ships could send sound downward. The sound traveled through the ocean, hit the seafloor, and bounced back. By measuring the time it took to return, scientists could estimate depth across large areas. For the first time, the ocean floor began to appear as a landscape. Mountains rose from the dark. Ridges crossed the seabed. Canyons cut through the deep. And trenches formed long shadows in the map of the world. The Mariana Trench was no longer just a strange deep point. It was a massive structure, a long curved scar in the Pacific seafloor. But sonar also created a new kind of mystery. It showed the shape of the trench, but not the experience of being there. A map can tell you how deep a place is. It cannot tell you what the darkness feels like. It cannot show the silence. It cannot show the pressure closing in from every direction. It cannot reveal whether the bottom is lifeless mud or a hidden ecosystem. That is why the Mariana Trench became more than a measurement problem. It became a challenge. Could humans build a machine strong enough to reach the bottom? Could cameras survive where sunlight never reaches? Could life exist in a place that seemed designed to destroy it? Every new map made the question sharper. The trench was real. It was deeper than anything else known in the ocean, and it was waiting. But knowing the location of the deepest place on Earth was only the beginning. The next step was far more dangerous. Someone had to go down. Finding the Mariana Trench was not the same as understanding it. A map could show where the deepest place on Earth was. Sonar could estimate its shape. Scientists could calculate the pressure, the depth, and the distance from the surface. But none of that answered the question that mattered most. What is actually down there? To find out, someone had to enter a place that seemed almost impossible to reach. At the surface, Challenger Deep looked ordinary. The ocean moved. The wind passed over the water. The sky reflected on the waves. Nothing warned you that below that calm surface was a drop almost 11 kilometers deep. But inside that depth, the world changed completely. The light disappeared. The temperature fell. The pressure increased with every meter. And by the time a vehicle reached the bottom, the water around it would press with more than 1,000 times the pressure humans feel at sea level. This was the problem. The deepest place on Earth was not guarded by distance. It was guarded by physics. To reach it, humans needed a machine strong enough to survive where ordinary submarines would fail. That machine was called Trieste. It was not sleek. It was not elegant. It looked strange because it was built for one purpose: survival. Trieste was a bathyscaphe, a deep-sea craft designed to sink through the ocean while protecting the people inside a small pressure sphere. That sphere was the heart of the mission. A tiny room strong enough to hold human life while the ocean tried to crush it from every direction. In 1960, Jacques Picard and Don Walsh climbed inside Trieste and began the descent into Challenger Deep. The journey down was slow, very slow. The surface did not vanish all at once. First, the sunlight softened. Then the blue water became darker. Then the darkness became complete. Outside the craft, there were no landmarks, no walls, no floor, no stars. Only black water in every direction. Inside, two men waited while the machine carried them deeper than any humans had ever gone. Every minute took them farther from help. Above them was the support ship. Above that was the sky. But between them and the surface were kilometers of water, pressure, and darkness. If something went wrong, rescue would not be simple. It might not be possible at all. That is what made the descent so dangerous. Not just the depth, the isolation. Trieste kept sinking, past the depths where sunlight disappears forever, past the range of most deep diving machines, past the wreck of the Titanic, past nearly every place humans had ever reached in the ocean. And still, the bottom had not appeared. Then, after hours of descent, the seafloor finally came into view, not as a beautiful landscape, not as a clear alien world, but as a pale, muddy surface in the beam of their lights. They had reached Challenger Deep. For the first time, humans were physically present at the deepest known point on Earth. It was one of the greatest exploration moments in history. But the reality was not cinematic. The bottom was difficult to see. The craft stirred up sediment. The view became cloudy. The deepest place on Earth did not reveal itself easily. It gave them only a brief, limited glimpse. Still, that glimpse was enough to change everything. Trieste proved that Challenger Deep was not just a number. It was a real place. A floor beneath almost 11 kilometers of water. A surface that could be reached. A place where humans could arrive, even if only for a short time. But the mission also revealed a problem that would shape every future expedition. Reaching the bottom was possible. Studying it was much harder. The crew could not explore widely. They could not walk outside. They could not collect everything scientists wanted. They could not stay long enough to understand the world around them. They had touched the deepest place on Earth, but they had barely seen it. And that is where the next chapter begins. Because after Trieste, the question changed. It was no longer whether humans could reach the bottom. They had already done that. The question became what the trench was hiding in the darkness just beyond the lights. What lived there? What moved there? What the mud contained? And what this impossible place could reveal about the planet above it. The deeper a machine travels into the ocean, the less the danger looks like something alive. There are no teeth, no storm, no visible wall blocking the way. The real danger is the water itself. At the surface, water feels ordinary. It moves around a swimmer. It lifts a boat. It seems soft. But in the Mariana Trench, water becomes one of the most powerful forces on Earth. Every meter downward adds more weight above. Every layer of ocean presses on the layer below it. By the time you reach Challenger Deep, almost 11 kilometers of water are stacked overhead. That weight does not press from one direction. It presses from everywhere. From above, from below, from the sides, around every bolt, every window, every seal, and every weak point in a vehicle. At the bottom of the trench, the pressure is more than 1,000 times stronger than the air pressure at sea level. That is not just an uncomfortable number. It is a destructive force. It can crush empty metal. It can collapse ordinary containers. It can break equipment that would survive almost anywhere else on Earth. This is why deep-sea vehicles are not built like normal submarines. A military submarine is powerful, but it is not designed for Challenger Deep. Most submarines travel through the upper parts of the ocean. The trench belongs to a completely different world. A vehicle going there has to be built like a pressure shell. Round shapes are used because they spread force more evenly. Thick metal protects the crew or instruments. Special windows must resist pressure without shattering. Every cable, joint, and sensor has to survive a place where one small weakness can become a disaster. Even cameras have to be protected. Even lights have to be protected. Even the simplest piece of equipment becomes a challenge. Because in the deepest ocean, failure does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it is just one seal giving way, one crack opening, one connection breaking, and the mission is over. This is why every descent is slow, careful, and expensive. You cannot rush into Challenger Deep. You have to earn each meter. The darkness adds another problem. Sunlight does not reach the trench floor. Not a little. Not faintly. Not at all. The bottom has never seen a sunrise. Every image from that world exists only because a machine brought light with it. Without artificial lights, the deepest place on Earth is completely black. That means scientists can only see what their cameras illuminate. A few meters of mud, a small patch of rock, a pale animal crossing the beam. Then darkness again. The cold is another part of the story. The water near the bottom is only a few degrees above freezing. There is no warmth from the sun, no changing weather, no familiar surface rhythm, just cold water, heavy pressure, and darkness that never ends. For humans, this environment is impossible. For machines, it is barely possible. And for life, it seems almost unfair. A living body at that depth has to exist under pressure that would destroy surface organisms. Its cells, proteins, and membranes must work in a world that pushes on them constantly. That is why life in the trench is so important. It shows that life is more flexible than we once believed. But before scientists could understand that life, they had to solve the physical problem of reaching it. The Mariana Trench is not dangerous because it attacks. It is dangerous because it does nothing. It simply exists. Cold, dark, heavy, patient. A machine can be designed perfectly for the surface and still fail there instantly. A human can stand beside the ocean and feel safe, while below that same water is a place no human body can enter. That contrast is what makes the trench so powerful. It is part of our planet, but it follows rules that feel completely foreign. And every time a submersible reaches the bottom, it is not just exploring a location, it is surviving a test of engineering, a test of science, a test of how far humans can push into a world that was never made for us. Only after passing that test could scientists begin to ask the question that changed the story. If the trench is so dark, so cold, and so violent in pressure, how can anything live there at all? The strangest discovery in the Mariana Trench was not that it was deep. Scientists already knew the numbers. They knew the pressure was extreme. They knew sunlight could not reach the bottom. They knew the cold and darkness would make every descent difficult. The real shock was that the trench was not empty. At the bottom of the deepest known place on Earth, something moved. Not a giant monster, not a fantasy creature. Something stranger, because it was real. Small pale animals living in mud. Microbes hidden in sediment. Creatures adapted to a world where almost every surface rule of life has been broken. For a long time, people assumed that life needed sunlight more than almost anything else. On land, sunlight feeds plants. In shallow seas, sunlight supports algae and plankton. Those organisms become the beginning of food chains. But at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, sunlight does not exist. There is no day, no night, no seasons in the way we know them, only permanent darkness. So life down there has to depend on something else. Much of the food comes from above. Tiny particles sink slowly through the ocean. Dead plankton, fragments of animals, organic material, dust from the living world near the surface. Scientists sometimes call this marine snow. It falls through the darkness for a very long time before reaching the deep seafloor. By the time it arrives, it may be only a faint trace of the world above. But in the trench, even a faint trace can matter. To surface animals, it would look like almost nothing. To life at the bottom, it can be survival. This is why the trench floor is not truly dead. It is quiet. It is slow. It is hungry, but it is alive. Some animals there are scavengers, feeding on whatever reaches the bottom. Others live in the sediment, where microbes break down material in ways that scientists are still studying. The deeper researchers look, the more they understand that life does not need comfort. It needs a way. In Challenger Deep, that way is extreme adaptation. Bodies must function under pressure that would crush ordinary organisms. Cells must remain stable. Proteins must still fold and work. Membranes must survive in a place where the water is pressing from every direction. Even movement is different. Nothing can waste energy. There is not enough food for that. Life in the trench is not fast and dramatic. It is careful, efficient, built for a world where every advantage matters. That is why the creatures found there often look strange to us. Pale bodies, soft forms, slow movement. No need for bright colors in a world without sunlight. No need to impress eyes that may never see them. They are not strange because they are impossible. They are strange because they are perfectly matched to a place we can barely enter. And that raises a bigger question. If life can survive at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, where else could it survive? Could life exist under the ice of distant moons? Could it survive in underground oceans? Could it live in places that seem dead only because we do not understand the rules yet? The trench does not answer those questions completely, but it changes how we ask them. It proves that life on Earth is not limited to the places that feel friendly to humans. It can exist in darkness, under pressure, in cold, with little food, in a world that seems impossible from the surface. And that may be the most important fact about the Mariana Trench. It is not only the deepest place we know, it is a test of what life can endure. Every tiny creature found there expands the border of the possible. Every sample of sediment suggests that the deep ocean is more active than it looks. Every mission reminds scientists that the bottom of the sea is not the end of life. It is another version of it. But this discovery also makes the trench more unsettling, because if life exists there, then the deepest place on Earth is not a silent grave. It is a hidden ecosystem. A dark living world beneath almost 11 kilometers of water. A place humans once imagined as empty. A place that was waiting the whole time. Not dead, not still, not fully understood. Alive in the dark. The Mariana Trench showed scientists something incredible. Life could survive at the bottom of the deepest known place on Earth. But the trench also revealed something much more uncomfortable. Even there, almost 11 kilometers below the surface, the ocean was not untouched. Human traces had arrived first. At first, that idea feels impossible. The Mariana Trench seems too remote, too deep, too protected by darkness and pressure. It feels like a place that should be separate from the rest of the planet, a sealed world beneath the Pacific. But the ocean does not work that way. Nothing in it is truly separate. The surface and the bottom are connected by slow movement, by sinking particles, by currents, by dead organisms, by waste, by everything the ocean carries downward. The same path that brings food to the trench can also bring pollution. Tiny pieces from the world above can fall for months through the water. They can drift through the darkness. They can settle into the mud. And once they arrive, they may remain there for a very long time. That is why one of the strangest discoveries from the deepest ocean was not a creature. It was evidence of us. Plastic has been found in the deep sea. Pollutants have been detected in organisms from extreme depths. Human-made material has reached places that almost no human has ever visited. This changes the story of the Mariana Trench. It is not only a place of mystery, it is also a mirror, a place so far from daily life that it should feel beyond our influence. And yet, our influence is there. The trench collects what sinks: marine snow, organic material, minerals, sediment, and now traces of human activity. The deepest mud on Earth can hold pieces of the surface world. That fact is difficult to ignore, because it means there may be no completely untouched ocean left. Not at the coast, not in the open sea, not even in the deepest trench on the planet. For scientists, this discovery is more than environmental shock. It is evidence of connection. What happens above does not stay above. A bottle, a fiber, a chemical trace, a fragment too small to see with the naked eye, can become part of a place that humans once imagined as unreachable. And in the Mariana Trench, everything happens slowly. There is no sunlight to break material down quickly. There are no waves to wash the floor clean. There is no easy reset. The bottom is cold, dark, still, and patient. What reaches it can become part of the sediment, buried layer by layer in the deepest archive on Earth. That makes the trench a record of our planet. Not only a record of geology, not only a record of life, but a record of what humans have done to the ocean. This is why researchers study the mud, the water, and the creatures that live there. They are not only asking what survives at the bottom, they are asking what has arrived there, what chemicals have traveled into the deep, what tiny fragments have entered the food chain, what the deepest animals are carrying inside them. The answers matter because the Mariana Trench is not an isolated whole. It is part of the global ocean, and the global ocean is one connected system. The water above the trench may look empty, the bottom may look silent, but between them is a constant exchange. Matter falls, currents move, life feeds, waste sinks, and the deepest place on Earth becomes connected to cities, ships, factories, rivers, coastlines, and people who will never see it. That may be the most unsettling fact of all. Humans reached the trench with submersibles only a few times, but our pollution reached it without needing a mission, without needing a crew, without needing lights, cameras, or pressure-proof machines. It simply followed the ocean downward. This does not make the Mariana Trench less mysterious. It makes it more important. Because if our traces can reach the deepest place on Earth, then the trench is not the end of the world. It is part of the world, a hidden place that records what happens above it. A dark floor beneath the Pacific, where life survives, the planet moves, and human fingerprints are already waiting in the mud. The Mariana Trench matters because it is not only deep. Depth is what makes it famous, but depth is not what makes it important. The trench is a meeting point for some of the biggest questions on Earth. How does the planet move? How far can life adapt? How connected is the ocean? And how much of our own world is still unknown? Every descent into the Mariana Trench answers one question and creates another. Geologists look at the trench and see the movement of Earth's crust. They see a place where one plate is being forced beneath another, a place where the ocean floor is not permanent, a place where rock, sediment, and ancient material are being pulled back into the planet. To them, the trench is not just a location. It is evidence that Earth is still active, still changing, still rebuilding itself from the inside. Biologists look at the same place and see something different. They see life at the edge of possibility. Tiny animals surviving in darkness, microbes living inside sediment, creatures shaped by cold, pressure, and hunger. To them, the trench is proof that life can exist far beyond the comfortable zones we understand. That changes how scientists think about the deep ocean, and it also changes how they think about life beyond Earth. If organisms can survive in Challenger Deep, then maybe life does not need a warm surface, sunlight, or familiar conditions. Maybe life only needs energy, chemistry, time, and a place to adapt. That is why the Mariana Trench matters to people who study distant worlds, icy moons, hidden oceans, planets with extreme environments. Places that once seemed too hostile may not be as lifeless as they appear. The trench is not an alien ocean, but it helps us imagine what one might be like. Environmental scientists see another story. They see a place that should have been protected by distance and depth, but was not. Pollution has reached the deep sea. Human-made material has reached the bottom. Chemical traces can move through the ocean and enter animals living in places humans almost never visit. This means the trench is not separate from the world above it. It is part of the same system, the same ocean, the same planet. That fact makes the Mariana Trench less like a remote curiosity and more like a warning. If the deepest place on Earth can carry signs of human activity, then there may be no place on the planet completely outside our influence. But the trench is also important for another reason. It reminds us how little we have actually seen. Humans have walked on the moon. Robots have crossed Mars. Telescopes have looked across billions of light years. But the deepest parts of our own ocean remain mostly unseen by human eyes. A submersible can descend for hours and still illuminate only a small patch of seafloor. A camera can record one narrow path through the darkness. A sample can bring back only a handful of mud from a world larger and more complex than the frame can show. That is the strange reality of deep ocean exploration. The Mariana Trench is known, and unknown at the same time. We know where it is. We know it is the deepest known ocean trench. We know pressure there is extreme. We know life exists there. We know human traces have arrived there. But we do not know the full story. We do not know every species that lives in its mud. We do not know every chemical process happening in its sediment. We do not know how the trench changes over long periods of time. We do not know what future missions will find when they look more carefully, stay longer, and see farther. That uncertainty is what keeps the trench powerful. It is not a mystery because nothing is known. It is a mystery because the more scientists learn, the bigger the hidden world becomes. The Mariana Trench forces us to hold two ideas at once. Earth is familiar, and Earth is still strange. The ocean covers most of the planet, but most of its deepest places remain outside ordinary human experience. We live on a world where the greatest darkness is not in space. It is underwater, and that darkness is not empty. It contains moving rock, living organisms, falling particles, ancient sediment, human traces, and questions that science has only begun to answer. That is why the Mariana Trench matters, not because it is the deepest point on a map, but because it shows us how much of our own planet is still beyond the reach of normal life. It is a frontier, not above us, but below us, hidden under the calm surface of the Pacific, waiting for the next machine, the next camera, and the next discovery. The Mariana Trench began as a number, a depth on a chart, a dark point on a map, a place so far below the surface that it was easier to imagine than to understand. But the deeper humans looked, the less simple it became. It was not just the deepest place on Earth, it was a moving wound in the planet's crust, a pressure chamber built by the ocean itself, a hidden ecosystem, a collector of particles falling from the world above, and, in the end, a mirror. Because what scientists found at the bottom was not one single shocking object, it was something bigger. They found that the deepest place on Earth is connected to everything, connected to geology, because the trench exists where the planet is swallowing part of its own crust. Connected to biology, because life survives there without sunlight, under pressure that should make survival seem impossible. Connected to human activity, because even plastic and pollution have reached a place almost no person has ever seen. That is the real discovery. The Mariana Trench is not separate from us. It only looks separate. From the surface, the Pacific seems calm and endless. But under that calm water is a vertical world almost 11 kilometers deep. A world where darkness is permanent, where pressure never relaxes, where food falls slowly from above, where tiny creatures move through mud that most humans will never see, and where the planet itself is still working in silence. This is why the trench feels so strange. It destroys the idea that Earth is already familiar. We live on this planet. We map it. We name its oceans. We fly over it. We photograph it from space. But beneath the surface of one ocean, there is still a world that feels almost unreachable. A world where every mission sees only a small patch of the truth. A submersible can descend for hours, and still light up only a few meters of seafloor. A camera can record a creature no one expected, then lose it again in the dark. A sample can bring back mud that contains life, chemistry, and traces of the surface world, but still leave most of the trench unexplored. That is the strange ending of this story. The deepest place on Earth has been reached, but it has not been fully revealed. We know enough to understand that it matters, but not enough to say that we understand it. The bottom of the Mariana Trench is not a final answer. It is a beginning. It tells us that life is harder to stop than we once believed. It tells us that the ocean is more connected than it appears. It tells us that human influence can travel farther than human bodies can. And it tells us that the most alien places are not always in the sky. Sometimes they are below us, hidden by water, protected by pressure, waiting in darkness. The most unsettling fact may be this: the Mariana Trench is not unreachable anymore. Machines can go there. Humans have been there. Cameras have seen the bottom. Samples have returned from the mud. And yet, the place remains mysterious. Not because it is completely unknown, but because every discovery opens a larger question. If life survives there, where else can it survive? If pollution reaches there, what part of Earth is still untouched? If the planet can hide a world like this beneath the ocean, what else are we missing in places we think we already know? The Mariana Trench is often called the deepest place on Earth, but that title is only the beginning of its story. Its true power is not in the record, it is in the reminder. Earth still has hidden worlds. Some are buried under ice, some are locked inside rock, some are drifting in the deep ocean, and one of them lies beneath the Pacific, where the seafloor falls into darkness and life continues anyway. So what did scientists find at the bottom of the Mariana Trench? They found mud, they found pressure, they found strange life, they found traces of us. But more than anything, they found a warning against certainty, a reminder that our planet is not fully known, not even close. And the next time we look up at the stars and wonder where the alien worlds are, it is worth remembering one fact. One of them is already here, under the ocean, on Earth, waiting at the bottom.